1 times 100 is greater than 100 times 90. Now, if you do the math on that, you know that that is mathematically incorrect. In fact, this principle is one of those principles where sometimes it applies and it's absolutely true, and other times it's the absolute opposite of true. And this is where leadership principles are more art form than science. Knowing when and how to apply them is much of the lesson you need to learn. When does this apply? And so the 1 times 100 is greater than the 100 times 90 very simply says that God can do more through one person who's 100% committed than through 100 people committed at about a 90% level. And there's certainly a sense in which the Dr. Livingston argument, you could say, that one man who's willing to go all in will go and reach the dark continent of Africa, to the extent that now I believe there are more Christians in Africa than in the cradle of Christianity from whence David Livingstone was sent. And so there's definitely a sense in which 100 people committed 90%. None of them would have gone to the dark continent of Africa back in the day, risked life and limb, given everything up to go and reach a whole continent. Now, I hope it's immediately apparent how, in a normal ongoing basis, I mean, 9,000 is greater than 100. Yes, true. And oftentimes in a team, one person working really hard cannot get anywhere near as much done as 100 people working somewhat hard, right? So there's certainly ways in which this applies and ways in which this doesn't. But as a key leader, what you need to realize is, when does this truth apply? And I would call it in some ways the Livingston principle, that one person who is all in will be the only person that will ever do it. And that's when the thing is daunting, when it's novel, it's a new concept, it's a new area, it's something that hasn't been tried before, when it requires great risk on the part of the individual. The 100 people that are 90% committed, none of them will do it, because something else is more important to them than the accomplishing of the task. And if something else is more important to you than the mission, then you will not do those things which are dangerous, those things which are novel, those things that are groundbreaking. You won't do it. Elon Musk, in some ways, is a modern example of this, a guy who almost went bankrupt several times, what with his creation of so many different companies. The 100 people, 90% committed, never would have done that. You got to be all in if you're going to do something new, if you're going to do something dangerous, or if you're going to break ground into an area of uncertain return on your investments. So, in your organization, whatever it may be, when you need something to be done that has never been done before, when you need somebody willing to do something that could risk their very livelihood or their life, you know this principle's true. 100 people who'll be there in the sunny days will never show up on the dark days when they're most needed. You need people that will show up, that will fight the monster, that will face death itself, because the mission matters more to them than their own life or livelihood. So, 1 times 100, greater than 100 times 90.